everybody, it's Safi and Marco, Dish Out on the Movies. And today we are doing a review of last night's latest episode of the White House Plumbers, episode 4, called The Writer's Wife. And I believe that the writer they're talking about is Hunt, and his wife would be the wife of the writer.
Wow.
Okay, well, again, it was I thought it was a very good episode. It was very smooth. There was a lot of emotion in it, in certain parts, between the writer's wife and the writer. She's totally fed up with him. What happens is they get caught. And that's where it left off, actually, at the end of the last episode. What I mean by that is the actual people who were in the DNC breaking in, the Cubans, and maybe one or two CIA people, Americans, they all got caught by some police. I think they were undercover police, like dressed as hippies. And so one little problem, though, was that Liddy and Hunt were there, too. This was at the Watergate, which is a huge...
Okay, I'm going to talk about the episode. So, First off, see, guys, this is why Safi doesn't talk in reviews until, like, minute 15 or something. So, first off, from last week, see, I was totally confused because last week I was under the assumption that he switched his pants, and that's why the letter was in the other person's pants.
No.
But apparently there's a whole other explanation that Safi had looked up. And so I think that that's a huge flaw with that episode, because that was never in that whole episode. You know, it was never in the episode that he hands the money to one of the guys and says, oh, go drop it in the mailbox for me.
In the Watergate, I believe.
Like, right? That's pretty bad. And, you know, this whole time I had thought it was because of the pants thing, and it wasn't at all. And it's like, I think that that's a major flaw. You know, it's like, are they assuming that you know the real thing? Like, are they assuming that you would know that, like, oh, he handed it to one of the guys and told them to mail it? Like, I thought from the episode, the way that it was shot and it was edited, that it was because he changed his pants. That he switched pants with one of the men. I mean, not hitmen, just...
robbers.
Weirdos.
Plumbers. Just plumbers.
Weirdos. But no, he didn't switch pants at all, so I thought, like, oh... And then you have Safi, and she didn't even notice at all. Like, Safi, why didn't you notice that? What was the deal with that? I mean,
did not see him. I didn't see any mailbox that they were talking about. I don't know if he's talking...
That's what you said, though. You said
that's what they said. But that's what I heard them say. That I watched it twice. I've been doing that.
They didn't say it in the episode.
No, I thought they did.
No.
Right at the beginning.
I don't think so.
No, I think they did.
But why didn't you correct me that whole, like, hour-long review then? That would make it even worse.
No, I saw it after you did that review.
But you watched it, like, 3 times before we did that review.
It's so subtle and buried.
Oh.
Some of the information.
Well,
which makes me wonder, like you just said, that they assume people already know, and I don't think so.
And I did not know.
So.
I thought from the way that the episode played out that it was another thing that they screwed up, and where it's like, oh, he changed his pants with one of them, and then, of course...
And that makes a lot of sense.
And that would have been a much better explanation, honestly, like... That would have made Howard Hunt look a lot better than he did in real life.
They put at the end of the episode a little paragraph that said, everything in here is kind of like made up, or, you know, you have to kind of imagine some of the little details about the children, what they're saying and doing. Sorry. And but then the real thing was what happened at the end. That really did happen. But that's what they said, though. Their main explanation about everything, pretty much everything, was that it was kind of made up. So, like, they kind of put together the scene, like you do when you're an archaeologist.
Well, obviously they'd have to do that. I mean, that's kind of like obvious.
So, no, I heard them say in the episode...
That thing with the letter, the thing with the fucking money...
He was supposed to mail it. And then, and they made a light of that during the episode.
Why would they do that? Why would they...
I think that's ridiculous, but I heard
They're on a mission. They're on a
job. I know. That's stupid.
Why would you do that?
I have no idea. It was stupid. But, I mean, that's like a stupid little detail that people who are doing something wrong, they gloss over it, they forget, and that's the thing that usually lands them into trouble. I mean, that's like a common thing.
Well, so I had to address that because, I mean, now that whole video is basically faulty because, it's like, oh, that didn't happen. It's a completely different thing. It's like, what the fuck? Safi, did you look up the guy who plays Liddy yet?
No,
What's his name?
I was looking
What's
at him
his
today
name?
because I don't know.
Oh.
Because I was thinking about, look at his hair. I think
Safi.
that's glued on. He has kind of like a...
It's been 4 weeks.
I don't care.
It's next week is the last week.
You want me to look it up now while you talk? I can.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that? Because it's just sickening the types of I don't know, like, what do you call it? Like the bullying, like the subtle jabs at this guy who plays Liddy, even though he is an amazing actor in the show.
He's an amazing actor.
He does. Everyone in the whole show deserves an award, practically. I mean, I really hope that the show gets a lot of awards at the Emmys, unlike Better Call Saul season 6. That show got nothing because the Emmys said, "Fuck you, shitty ass fucking piece of shit hack writers."
Jesus.
Well, they are. I mean, Safi, with what they did to Better Call Saul, they deserve to be put in prison longer than the Watergate burglars ever got in prison, in my opinion. In solitary confinement. In the worst prison. So, this episode, it had a lot of payoffs, in my opinion. The first payoff was the whole family situation. You had a lot more of Howard's family life and his interactions with them. And it was funny because with both of them, they dealt with the situation a completely different way with their families. And, Howard, the first thing he does in the episode is he gets his son to go help him get rid of evidence, which I thought, I didn't really have a problem with that. It wasn't that big of a deal.
I didn't think it was either, but what confused me about that, and I watched it again, and I'm still confused, is he wants them to wipe everything down, but then they throw it in the river. It's going to get wiped down anyway with the water. Well, I didn't get that, and I watched it, and like I said, I watched the episode twice, and I'm confused. Why would you do that?
Well,
You're a spy. My God.
I remembered that Irishman sequence where Robert De Niro was throwing all the guns in that river. Remember that? He'd do a hitman job, and they just go to the river and throw the gun in the river, and there's millions of guns in the fucking river.
Well, they have YouTube videos about this. They have this group of magnet fishermen, and they're little chunk magnets, and they go to these places like that, and they bring up all these guns. They call the police pick them up, and sometimes they're a part of a case. So I don't know what they're doing.
And so, and the thing too, I think from what I saw, because I only watched it once, Safi watched it 5 times so she could even understand it.
I I
Right,
lived
Safi?
it. What are you talking about?
But Safi, you watched it like 5 times.
Okay.
Any comment? Safi?
I'm making the comments as we go along.
It's taking you this long to look up an actor from a show?
On my phone, yeah. It wasn't even. It was on LTE.
Hey, Safi. You are fired.
Oh boy.
Remember that, Safi?
Okay, Justin Theroux plays Gordon Liddy.
Oh, it took you 4 weeks to say that name. 4 weeks, Safi. How does it feel?
Oh my God, here he is. Wow.
Wow.
He really does a good job acting.
Yeah, he deserves an award. So anyways, the show starts off, and what was weird to me too is the fact that his son was wiping things off with gloves, and then from what I saw, his dad was taking the items with his bare hands and then throwing them in the water. So how did that, wouldn't that have like, because his son had gloves on, he wiped all the prints off that his dad made, and then his dad grabs these items with his hands. I didn't understand that. I thought that was kind of bizarre. I don't know if that's what happened in real life. I would assume though, because another thing too is the fact that he dumped all this evidence with the Watergate key. Like, the Watergate key would indicate that all the other stuff around it is probably involved with that case. And so why wouldn't you drive it to another river somewhere or something? Like, why would you dump all that stuff in the same area?
I know. I don't, that's why I said there were right off that bridge, and then somebody came by and they had to pretend like they were changing a tire.
And of course, one thing that I really loved was was all the red lighting, and that was like them tributing to Scorsese and how he would do that with his gangster movies, and you know, he loved using red lighting to symbolize evil, like the scene where Joe Pesci kills that guy in the trunk, or I mean he finishes killing him, and you know there's red light everywhere. I really like that they did that for this whole opening sequence. You know, this has probably been the best episode so far, I would say. Like, last episode was great, but then that whole mix-up with the money is totally embarrassing. Like, I bet there's lots of other people who would assume the same thing based on the episode that they gave us.
Well, they had, at the end, like, and you pointed it out to me, when the crooks get caught in the office, the DNC. One of the policemen says, "Oh, what's this? This check or whatever to the country club."
And he pulls it out of his pants.
And he tacks it up on the McGovern's poster. I believe.
No, it was Nixon's poster,
Safi.
Safi.
Nixon's poster.
God, do you have to watch it again?
Marco.
So that whole thing, it was like, how would you not assume that he switched pants, Safi? How would you?
I'm not assuming anything.
You could turn all the volume off. Well, how did it get there then? Like, why wouldn't they tell us how it got there? Like, I never heard how it did.
Well, it had been in his pants because he wouldn't be holding it while they're doing a robbery.
Well, no, how did it get into his pants?
He put it there. He was supposed to mail it for him.
But why can't they tell us that?
That's kind of like the running joke.
Well, why can't they tell us that, though? Like, why do I have to find out about it a week later via Safi from Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies?
Oh, boy.
Like, you see how ridiculous that is, Safi?
And they do. It's funny because I don't know if... I don't think Hunt knew that they had that. They got that because he tried to play tennis with his family at the country club.
Yeah.
A while later. And
they wouldn't let him.
They wouldn't let him because they said, "You haven't paid the bill." And he said, "Yes, I did. I sent it in." So I don't think he knew that was evidence.
So anyways, so that whole event starts off the episode, and let's just get Liddy over with, because this episode is mainly about the writer and the writer's wife. And and by the way, this show is a much better spy show than The Old Man. With a much better female spy. I mean, remember that stupid shit in The Old Man, Safi, where he's training that random woman that he kidnapped on how to be a spy? Like, that's the fucking stupidest shit. Anyways, see, I'm just making this show look like the best show of the year, which I would say that it comes close to Your Honor, and I might put it above Your Honor based on the finale, because Your Honor's finale was a complete piece of trash. So Liddy, he is just like fully ready to give it all up for my president and go to prison and get gang raped. And he's just really excited about it. Like, he says, I will get assassinated if you want me to. I am NPC. I will stand on corner if you want me to get shot from Nixon.
They get a good clean headshot too.
They can get somebody who isn't Lee Harvey Oswald, the patsy, to shoot the shot. And then I will die for my president, Nixon. Like, of all the presidents, why would you want to die for Nixon?
Oh, they were getting rid of the Reds.
But like,
that's what was said in the episode.
Nobody would ever want to die for that piece of shit McGovern, but I mean Nixon, it's like he comes pretty close. Well, not that close, because I would say that out of all the presidential candidates in history, McGovern is like one of the top 5 worst. Like, I would never ever have voted for McGovern. Like, even after knowing about Watergate, I still would have voted for Nixon over McGovern. Sorry, but McGovern is McGovern, and he's probably one of the worst politicians in history. Safi.
Well, I voted for him.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sorry.
That figures.
I wouldn't vote for, but it's hard for me to say that Nixon was trash, although the behavior of him and the rest he
was trash. He was involved with the JFK assassination too.
Hunt and Liddy, after, they're taking the fall for him.
Nixon went to the Bohemian Grove.
Oh,
and
I know what that is.
And he took all his clothes off and had sex with gay prostitutes and shit.
Well,
like,
that
Safi,
sounds like bullshit. Don't tell me that.
Safi, Nixon is a piece of shit. They're all pieces of shit.
Okay, well, I don't think anybody's as bad as you-know-who. So anyway,
no.
Let's just keep going on the episode.
Well, because we have to set the context for this quote of, I'll get assassinated for Nixon, and I'll stand on the street and get shot. Like, you have to kind of say, like, what the fuck is up with that, mustache man? Like, grow up. Like,
he was very adamant in his beliefs.
Yeah.
And he wasn't shy about saying them, and he wasn't doubtful at all. He was right on target. Like, that's the way I want to believe, and you don't like it, and I think he was disappointed that they abandoned them, and we can talk more about that.
Well, we're talking about it, Safi. Okay, now it's time to turn off the game.
Fucking game.
The game system.
I'm playing any game.
No, Safi, don't you remember that story from Mrs. Russ in 10th grade?
Oh, yeah.
With, there was this diabetic guy in our class, and he was sitting next to me in the computer lab, and he had this, like, automatic insulin or blood sugar monitor thing.
He had that in him. Probably have one. They have them now. They advertise them. This little inside. It's a little monitor they insert it inside your body.
And he had it.
And it tells you if your blood sugar's too low.
He had it, and it was going beep, 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 beep. And then all of a sudden, you had that dipshit Mrs. Russ, and she's like, okay, turn off the game system. And she kept getting madder and madder, and finally, And he was just like shaking his head like, what is she talking about? Like, does he really have to explain to her because she's so retarded?
Too.
And so eventually she came right up to him, was going to give him a detention, and he had to show her the diabetic thing and tell her, like, you're a fucking retard, Mrs. Russ. Which still. So that's the retarded diabetic game system story. So Liddy, his family isn't getting any payouts from the criminal people
at the White House.
They're not getting any sort of like help for keeping their mouths shut. And still, though, Liddy is just completely on his president's side. He's just completely like...
Well, he doesn't know. He doesn't know at first.
But he finds out near the end, and he's still on their side, basically.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous, in my opinion.
And he doesn't show that it's a little bit he looks disappointed, but he bounces right back and shows us, like Marco says, his total support.
Yeah.
For the president.
Yeah. And he's got 5 children, and he doesn't have any work. And but by the way,
was a teacher. She went back to teaching.
Well, that was a joke, Safi, because teachers don't even make any money. Like, that was the whole point, was that was a joke. Like, I went back to teaching. Ha 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 ha. Teachers don't make any money because they just don't for some reason. Ha ha ha. 5 children. And so, but at the beginning of the episode, Liddy is actually shredding all the money that he made, which was really weird because
he said the numbers would correlate with the bills that were found on the Cubans in the robbery, and so that would lead back to the White House. He was constantly protecting them at the White House.
Yeah, and then he fucking is shredding soap too.
Oh, was he? I wonder what the other thing was.
He was shredding soap.
Yeah, a little, from the Watergate, because that is a hotel, too.
I mean, that was
that
just...
was from the Watergate Hotel soap.
And it's funny, too, because, by the way, before we get more into the episode, we both kind of watched some of him later on. And so I watched some of him on Fear Factor, where he seemed
real, Liddy.
He seemed like he was invincible, which was pretty scary. I mean, if you watched him on the on Fear Factor, you would think, how the hell is he like that back then? Like, where he's so incompetent. Like, he is so like opposite of what he is on this show on Fear Factor. And then I also I tried to listen to his radio show. He had a radio show from 1992 to like 2012, and I couldn't really get into it. I mean, he was the first video that I found. There's this woman, and she came on. She was a total Karen. She was a total bitch, and she was talking about partial birth abortions.
Oh, God.
And she was saying that it was like
a terrible thing to have to be talking about on TV.
She was saying that it was something was leftist propaganda, and he actually like fired back at her, and he, I will say that he is very good at like debating.
Yes, he is.
He is very good at like talking to somebody about stuff, but he is not a good radio host in my opinion. Like, I've heard much better, so I would say that his radio show is kind of trash. But Safi, would you like to listen to that?
No.
This wham, and she's like,
I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it.
I'm surprised.
They got their way. They got their. They're banning abortion right and left all over the country. They got their way. I don't want to hear it.
She was like, I'm surprised you fell for that leftist propaganda. And he was like, wait a second, lady. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, I bet.
And he
has 5 children,
He really put her in her place, too. Like, he really did.
That's good.
So he is really good at debating.
Well, he was on, I did see a little YouTube video, didn't watch the whole thing. He was on David Letterman in David Letterman's early days. And I thought that was interesting. And he was a very dynamic guest and a very effusive. And he talked about, I guess, apparently he and I think it was the psychiatrist, the office that they broke into. It was the guy who did the LSD. Can't think of his name, but was very left, and of course Lydia's very right. And they got to be friends, and they would go and do these debates together about things. And Lydia was very respectful of the guy, even though they were polar opposites on a lot of issues.
Yeah, that's what's weird is that in real life it seems like he's a pretty chill guy.
Yeah.
Compared to this show where he's like a complete like insane criminal character. He's conspicuous. He's a conspicuous character.
Yes, he is.
So this whole episode too, the Hunts are receiving payouts, and the wife is taking a percentage of the money over to the Liddy household and disguising it as though the money was given to them by the White House.
Well,
and it's not like she's giving them the money.
No, but the thing is, she was pissed because she knows that her husband, even though she thinks, like, for instance, that destruction of the evidence at the beginning, well, her son told her.
That wasn't that bad.
She got mad, though, and she was just totally mad.
To get mad.
She stood up for him and said, look, he deserves to be supported, meaning financial support, and so do the rest. And so they asked, are the Cubans being supported? They're going to be taken care of. That's what they said. And then he said, well, what about us? And yeah, and but she argued for more money, and she stood up for him.
Safi, we're not at that point yet.
Well,
we're just talking about the Liddy household.
But she stood up for them.
You're completely like jumping the gun like usual.
Okay, well, she stood up for them.
Yeah.
And so did Hunt too, both of them.
Yeah, and they're not going to give them anything at all, which is totally ironic considering how much of a little bitch he is for Nixon.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's so weird. And
the thing is though is that this episode was a great episode because with all the other episodes, if they didn't show how terrible the Nixon administration was, this episode showed it because all their actions spoke for them louder than their words would have.
Yeah,
and
or
so
inactions.
Everything they did this whole episode just showed how evil they were, and just showed how, they all should have been probably put under a guillotine.
Well, they all went to prison.
Like French Revolution style. Nixon, all of them. They should have been put out completely for what they did because they were committing murder as well, which we'll get to later on. I mean, They and the fact is the fact that back then, especially, well, nowadays they do it as well, but back then, they would just overtly kill people, and then, you'd have all the mainstream propaganda networks just saying, oh, it was an accident, it was a this, it was a that, and, they'd spin their little narrative.
I don't know, it seemed like quite a few people now, of course, they said they made up, like, how this would play out in certain areas, but a lot of people seem to ask about her Mrs. Hunt.
Safi, you're jumping the gun again.
Well, a lot of people ask her. It was a lot of people, even Liddy asked Hunt about this thing in Dallas.
You saw that with the JFK movie. All those lists of names of people who knew things about the assassination and then who just mysteriously died after that happened, and then it's just like written off completely. And it's like, these people are killers. They deserve to be put out of their misery. They deserve to be put on trial too, because it's clear. It's like they just kill people in plain sight, and it's like, that's not okay at all. And so we'll get to that later in this video, though, because we've got to go through the whole episode with Hunt and his pancakes and his omelets and his apron, his very womanly apron. I mean, Howard Hunt, he comes off as like a much more likable person as the show goes on. But he also comes off of as kind of a weakling. Like, he thinks that he's really macho, and you have like a certain impression of him at the beginning of the show, but now it's like he's totally like feminized almost. Like his wife was more of a man than him, and it seemed like he was really like coming apart, and then he's just making breakfasts for his family. And that was pretty funny. Just the whole episode, he's just cooking breakfasts and shit. And hiding in his bunker, his bomb shelter.
They have a bomb shelter.
Which
it was there when they moved in.
Why can't I have a bomb shelter? I want a bomb shelter. Safi?
I don't know.
I want a bomb shelter.
We live in the East Coast, too, so...
I want a bomb shelter.
Okay, Marco, let's move on now.
I just want a bomb shelter. Hey, Safi, how many children in the 50s do you think asked for a bomb shelter for Christmas?
Nobody.
Would that be funny? I want Santa Claus to give me a bomb shelter. So anyways, the whole episode is just them deciding how to go through with what's going on, how to handle it, and they don't want to say any names. They don't want to, they want to be very, very careful about it because they're still obsessed with being loyal. Except Hunt kind of changes, and he kind of says, well, this is really kind of a shitty situation. We should make money, and we should profit and just sell our story, which is a great idea.
Right. That's right.
And Lydia is the one who says, no, I'm not doing that because it would go against Nixon. No.
Yeah, and they talked about they had even gotten some random figures, and it would bring them over $1 million.
No, $500,000 back then, but now it would have been a lot more.
And that's because Hunt was a writer. He wrote spy novels, and so they thought he'd be perfectly capable, and he did too, of writing a tell-all book, just their story. Not really getting into naming names, but just their story. But I think that's kind of naive because I think they would have to have a few names to put in their story to make it complete. So, but anyway, Liddy was totally against it. And even his wife said, oh, come on. Because they knew, well, Liddy's didn't know yet that this is when they find out they're not being supported. That the Hunts have been supporting them, but even the Hunts were realistic. They knew this little gravy train was not going to last, and especially down the pipeline when people start going to jail. So he was really, right on the money. And they have this whole interesting thing, too, with the wife, where they want to deal with her, they don't want to deal with Howard. Like, they want to talk to her about the money. They want her to get the money. They want her to handle all that stuff. Because I think at this point they figured out how Howard is. Like, how crappy he is at doing these missions and handling anything. And so, that was the interesting part about this episode, is that she was kind of the star of the episode, almost. Yeah, she was. And she kept a ledger.
Yeah.
Of all the payments, how much they were, everything about them. And that was probably something that really happened. I don't know. I've been trying to read about it. This thing with her is really complicated and long. So I started reading about it last night, but I didn't get through it.
Oh, that figures.
So, well, it's just a big story.
But Safi,
it's not even solved. So.
Well, none of it's solved because they don't want it to be solved because they're fucking evil, still, and so she in terms of acting, she did the best job this episode, and then I would say probably Woody Harrelson second, and then Liddy third, because Liddy, he kind of took a back seat in this episode. It was very focused on the Hunt family and her, and how she was starting to question everything, and say, like, I probably shouldn't be married to Howard, because she heard about a stewardess as well, hearing about him having an affair, which it turns out she slept with, like, millions of men because of the typical excuse of, like, oh, the guy was away, so, she couldn't just sit around like a normal person. No, she had to sleep with anyone who came in the door. Like, apparently that's how women are. Isn't that bizarre, Safi? Like, I don't understand this type of, ew.
I don't think that's true. I think she, at least, now we don't know if this is for sure.
Like, she
had one person, because he found Hunt, the husband, found all these letters, but it was to one particular person.
I don't know. She made it seem like she just slept with anyone who came in the door.
I didn't get that.
Which is really weird, because it's like,
I didn't get that.
Ew, gross.
I don't know how that could be. She had small children at home.
I don't know, Safi.
I don't know. But that's what's saying. This is where it's...
the children are in that one room. Don't go in that one room.
It's ragged. That kind of stuff.
I can't be without a man for more than 24 hours.
Yeah.
Like, that's just really weird.
I know.
Like, I don't understand.
I don't agree with that
like,
at all.
Ew. Like, I mean, I don't know why he wasn't glad that they were getting divorced. She's such a whore. She can't, like, be 24 hours without a man at home. Like, what a, gross. So anyways, besides that part, she is pretty smart, and she's trying to get them money, and she's trying to blackmail them with the fact that she knows that her husband was involved with the JFK assassination.
Yeah, they bring that up.
Which he was. Sorry.
No, he was. He said he was. They've got that. It's on the internet.
There are a lot of people who were, and they weren't Lee Harvey Oswald, the fall guy. Safi?
What?
Why did they do that to Lee Harvey? I mean, why would they do that to that guy? Like,
they do that today. They pick somebody and they make him the fall guy. It happens every day.
And pretty much every serial killer case is just the fall guy case. You've seen that with, like, all the serial killers, pretty much. And terrorists, school shooters, it's all the same thing.
I don't think so. Let's not get into that.
It's
okay,
true,
so let's keep moving now.
It's gotta be said.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry, that ain't the case.
Safi, have you read about Columbine?
Marco, let's not get into school shoes. If you start denying them, I'm not going to do these anymore.
I'm not denying them. I'm talking about how, they just pick out, they have like 5 shooters, and then they just say, oh, well, these 2 are the only ones who did all this shooting. And it's like,
I think they were.
That's false. That's completely false.
Really, Marco? Who else did it?
It's been proven.
I don't know who it's been. I think that's bullshit.
Look it up, Safi.
No. Okay,
so anyways,
let's keep moving.
But it's all the same story. And they just keep doing it over and over and over again. And so I liked how the show is kind of exposing that. It really was a great episode in terms of, there's not a lot of episodes like this nowadays that would show this type of anti-CNN, Fox News establishment narrative, where it's like, it's clearly painting a picture that the wife threatened to talk about the JFK assassination and then she's on a plane with some sort of a reporter.
From CBS.
And then the entire plane gets crashed and destroyed.
And this really happened. I don't know about she's giving any interview, but...
They were murdered.
The plane crash really happened. It's under mysterious circumstances.
They were murdered.
I've been reading about it.
It's not mysterious. They were murdered.
Well, just the way it went down. They said what the person, the pilot, did was something that was kind of a rookie, stupid mistake.
They were murdered.
Anyway, but no matter what, I mean, this is today, 2023. They don't even have an answer.
And really, they have an answer. They were murdered.
Well, they don't have any other facts.
They don't need to. They were murdered. It's really that simple.
The other facts.
They were murdered.
Okay, Marco.
And really, to me, I think, when it all comes down to it, you can point all the fingers and you can put all the people to death who were responsible for this type of stuff. But when it all comes down to it, all this stuff just leads back to the CIA. I mean, that's where it all leads back to. That's where all evil leads back to, is the CIA.
Well, they used to be.
Now it's still the same.
I don't agree with that.
And so,
I don't agree with that.
This episode really highlights how much of a threat that the CIA is to America.
Marco, just stop already.
With just killing people right and left.
That was back then. It's
now as well.
They had the control put on them.
No, they don't have any control.
You don't know anything.
They don't have any control.
There were laws put in place about.
No, they don't care about a law.
Okay, we're not gonna get arguing about the CIA.
Safi,
back then,
they killed a president. Do you think they care about the law?
Back then,
do you think that people?
Marco,
do you think
stop
that?
now.
Do you think that people who killed a president would care about laws that were put on them?
Back then, it was bad.
They wouldn't care.
And so anyway,
they would get worse.
Reading about it today, though, it's still under terrible, mysterious circumstances that she was killed.
And it's not mysterious at all. And we all know.
So it really did happen. That's not something they made up for the show or anything. And the thing is, she, I think, believed that she was getting money. She was picking up some money to bring back.
And it was way worse of a thing, too, than the Watergate burglary itself. Like, that was another great thing about it, was the fact that last episode you thought, oh, the biggest thing that's going to happen in this series is the Watergate burglary. But this was really the biggest thing that happened so far. The fact that this plane full of people were murdered by the CIA and by people associated with the CIA to silence people from the JFK assassination truth coming out, which it already comes out anyways, because they suck, they're incompetent, they're pieces of trash, and so I would say that this episode is an A+.
Well, it's just really sad because they show scenes from next week, they show her children, and they're having the funeral, and they're all crying and hysterical.
Safi, we're talking about this episode.
I know that, but it's just, that's going to happen, and then they show Howard, and he's got his little sunglasses on. He's very stoic. So.
Yeah, he's now going to wear his sunglasses all the time, which you always see in the movies and everything. You always see him with his little hat and his sunglasses. He's starting to do that. He's starting to do that this episode. No, the real guy. Like.
Oh, Hunt. Yeah.
Oh, Safi.
So, I thought it was a really well done episode too, and there, like I said, there was a lot of different emotions in it. I mean, this wasn't just that's the way it was though back then. There's this little robbery, and they even put on the real newscasts that were on saying something really mysterious happened in D.C. overnight. and they talk about this robbery, and it was just like a little thing, but it really led to a real big thing. And of course, you have that plane crash.
I almost think that the show could have been longer, because I think that they could have had JFK assassination stuff attached to the first part of it, because the point is that anyone who would say anything about the JFK assassination would get killed. All of them. And, you saw at the end of the JFK movie thousands and thousands of names of people who just mysteriously die. Like, there was this one guy, and they said he died by a karate chop. And there was another guy, and they said he pointed, like, a rifle at himself and shot himself. Like, these really ridiculous non-explanations. And it's like, that's the point of this episode, is that if you say anything about the JFK assassination, you get killed.
And he said, too, at the end of the episode, Hunt said, who was he? He was talking to Liddy. He said, I said some things. And he was talking about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they kind of, at near the end, both of the Hunts made kind of threats. They knew these things, and
they should be threatening them, because, I mean, they did that, so...
And look what happened.
And they knew it, too. I mean, that's the thing. They knew it. Like, why would these people have just been killed? Like, because they knew that they were accomplices and that they were involved with this crime. And that includes Nixon.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't think Nixon even had to be involved, even if he wanted to.
No, he was involved. And, Jesse Ventura talked about that. Remember, Safi?
No, I don't.
Nixon was involved, Ford was involved, Bush was involved. They were all involved, because they're fucking stupid. And so, the point, I think the show, in a way, it kind of does a disservice to this episode a little bit, because, if you look at this episode alone, you can just say, oh, well, it's all the Watergate burglary plus the JFK stuff. But when you really zoom out and look at the full picture, you can see that in general, it was all about the JFK assassination. Like, there was another, because Oliver Stone made this documentary about the assassination, and there was another guy whose plane crashed mysteriously, and he talked about it in the documentary. And, he was another person who was murdered. And so I think that's kind of a shame, because people watching it, they might not really zoom out to that full picture.
Well, like I said, this was brought up several times during the episode. Certain, like Liddy. Liddy asked kind of about the assassination. Then when that woman was on the plane, Mrs. Hunt, even the CBS woman, she was a lot younger, asked a question, and she said, my husband told the Warren Commission that he was at home cooking me dinner. He wasn't anywhere near there.
No.
And the CBS person said, right, are you sure about that? You sure you want to say that? And so, I mean, if there's some other times too, but those happened kind of near the end, and where they brought it up, and I find that really odd. But Hunt knew. He said that. He even said, I've never been arrested for anything, for doing anything at home. I've always been in another country, and I've been taken care of. If anything happened and I got arrested or I got in trouble, I was taken care of. So this is all new to me, getting caught at home in the United States. That's what I mean. So there's just all kinds of weird innuendos, and I just think it's terrible that Mrs. Hunt was killed. I remember my mom telling me, because this was when I was a senior in high school, all this stuff was happening with the Plumbers. And I remember my mom saying that somebody's wife had tons of money with her in her satchel, and she was killed in a plane crash. And so I knew that this was going to happen. I knew this wasn't made up. So anyway, because I'd heard it before. I just could not pay close enough attention. But believe me, if you pay attention now and you look back at all this, it's very complex. I mean, there's lots of layers to it. Lots of people involved. All the way up to the president. And of course, and they even say, what I read, that Nixon had ordered the invasion at the Democratic headquarters, and I guess he had denied it. Hunt or Liddy or both had denied it before, but they said it later on that he did. So.
And Liddy is so gay that he's like his most proudest moment is the fact that Nixon gave his memo an A+. He wrote Nixon a memo about replacing someone or firing someone. And
replacing the head of the FBI,
and Nixon,
J. Edgar Hoover.
Nixon said it was the best memo he ever read. Like, what a little bitch. Like, why would... even if he said that, too, it's like, he probably would say that to anyone who said the same thing. Like, anyone who wrote him a memo saying that, he would have said, that's the best memo I've ever heard, like, ever read. So, it wasn't really something to be proud of. And so, I don't know, in the next episode, like, are they going to change it all? Like, what are they going to do based off of this week? And how are they going to react? Is Liddy finally going to, change? Because he didn't seem like he was the same character years later. Like, it seems like he did make some sort of a change somewhere.
Well, he did go to prison, so...
But I mean, like, just belief-wise and just... I mean, right now he's almost like a slave. He's like a Manchurian candidate for Nixon. And so how does he make that change? When does he make that change? It'd be kind of cool if that's what next episode was about. Like, if it was a strong focus on him just completely switching opposite in terms of, like, loyalty to this president. Like, not in terms of, like, just in general political beliefs. Because he'd never change in terms of that.
Well, he told his wife to be prepared for him to go to prison. And she went, what? And he just made it seem like something really normal. Like it wasn't any big deal. And yeah. I don't know, she seemed the way they had her, she was kind of spacey or flaky or something. And I don't think she got it. So what he was doing and what was going on.
Yeah.
So the other wife, Mr. Hunt's wife, she wasn't like that.
No.
She was more involved in what was going on in terms of the outcome, which was getting them taken care of with monetary payments. And of course she was for her husband writing a tell-all. She thought it was a good idea because they would get taken care of, but they wouldn't have to worry about Nixon taking care of them. So I don't know what else there is to say about it.
Did you grade the episode? Did you ever grade it?
I would give it an A.
Oh, and that's disappointing.
I don't care.
Not an A+, like me?
No, it doesn't matter. An A is an A is an A.
That's not what Liddy would say. He would say, Nixon gave me an A+ memo.
Yeah, I know. On my memo, So, I didn't say this last time, but be sure to like and subscribe. We welcome new subscribers. And if you like this podcast or audio or whatever you want to call it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you can, watch this series. It is really good. And, if you have any trouble with the facts that you'd like, just look them up. You can look if you look up on the newspapers.com site, they have a whole front page of the paper. They have all the pictures of the people who were arrested and charged. And I'm not just talking about the Cubans. I'm talking about all the others. Because they all went to jail. But they didn't all go the same amount of time for lengthy sentences. In fact, I think Liddy and Hunt had the longer sentences. Even Spiro Agnew, if you remember him, he went to prison too, but that was for doing something else. It had nothing to do with that.
What did he ever do?
Yeah.
What did Spiro?
He did some kind of financial fraud.
What did Spiro's Deli ever do?
He did fraud. Some kind of financial fraud.
Well, his grilled cheese is pretty good. Spiro's.
Weird name.
Get it, Safi? Because it's Spiro's.
That's a Greek place. This guy, I don't know what he was.
Pretty good grilled cheese.
Yeah. So anyway, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.